Kyle here from allmediareviews.blogspot.com. If I can insert the image here, I will. But I just finally watched that film that had been talked about since last fall I'd seen. And I'm an independent film, I wouldn't call me a junkie, but I'm a supporter and fanatic. When it's good, I mean, I don't see all of them, and I don't see nearly as many as I used to. If I had the time and free time, I would do more of it, and maybe that will happen someday. But anyway, a lot of my favorite movies, films, as they call them, of all time are the independent stuff. For the last 20, 30, 35 years, 30 years, more so. But a movie that Paul Thomas Anderson put out a movie. I've seen some of his movies. I'm pretty sure I saw Magnolia, if that's the one with Tom Cruise. Yeah. And I've seen like parts of Boogie Nights and some of his other stuff. But anyway, he put out a movie called Licorice Pizza, and it was getting a fair amount of buzz. It still is getting a fair amount of buzz with like the award season and stuff like that. It stars, well, basically two first-time actors. One being Cooper Hoffman, who's the son of the late Philip Seymour Hoffman, who I am a fan of. So a lot of his roles, Schenectady, New York, especially, is one of my favorite movies of all time. And he's done a lot of really good work. He did a lot of good. Sadly, he's not around anymore. But his son, Cooper, well, does look somewhat like him. Doesn't look exactly like him, I guess, but does look enough like him. I guess it was intentional that he didn't want to like get exposed to the whole industry that much. And I'll just say this off the bat. I thought I read something when I read about this film initially, and he was in it. This was Philip Seymour Hoffman's son. That this was like a one-time deal, like one and done. He was going to do this, and then he may never do movies again. No, some of the other comments I've seen, reviews I've read just since watching that movie last night, I'm not so sure about that. And then it stars Haim, Alana Haim from the band Haim, I think it's Haim, Haim. Her and her sisters, and her parents are in it too, which is weird. It's a lot of Paul Thomas Anderson's movies. Like I don't know how many of them, but a lot of them are set in the 70s. A lot of them are like period based. So, but it's to get into the actual story of Licorice Pizza. The title, the only thing I can come up with is like sort of the aesthetic and layers between the two lead characters. It may be coming slightly from that. I don't know. It's kind of abstract in a lot of ways, though. I don't know if licorice and pizza were big in the set like in the, I want to say it's the mid 70s, but it might be like 72 or 73. It's kind of a love story. Cooper Hoffman plays a 15-year-old. He's a child actor. It's set in like Southern California. Sherman Oaks is where he's from. Alana Haim, her character Alana Kane, being Jewish, also they mention that a number of times. That comes into the plot a little bit here and there. Is much older than him as she is in real life. She's like 29 in real life. Her character is like 25. I'm not sure if that's exactly the age that they meant her. She mentions, but there's a lot of like sort of off the cuff comments about things like age and stuff like that. But there's an age difference. It doesn't seem that obvious. If it was the opposite, where he was 29 and she was 15, it would seem more blatant. Kind of like, what is it? Fast Times at Ridgemont High, the Jennifer Jason Leigh character. That gap wasn't even that much. But it's not a short movie. It's over 2 hours. And it's weird how, Philip Seymour Hoffman's kid, I should just be calling him Cooper Hoffman. His name is Gary. Gary's character, Gary Valentine, definitely seems older than he is. It's kind of a case of where you have a kid who kind of grows up in the industry, and it doesn't get to him so much, at least on the surface, that he seems to have already grown up before he's really of age to grow up, because he's in high school. He meets her taking photos on picture day at his high school, but the high school part of his life is so limited. It's like a child actor with school. They do it, they have to do it, they try to do it, but it's not a priority. You see, I've read many cases of many actors that ended up getting in Hollywood and then leaving because they wanted to focus on school. Who was it? Oh, the girl from The Conners now. I forget the actress's name. The girl who played Becky. That's why she left Roseanne, because she wanted to go back to school. Anyway, but he seems older and he's experienced, and like what her character is, she just works for this little photo company. She's in her mid-20s or whatever, and she doesn't really have an idea her direction. She's living with her parents, just like her sisters are, and yeah, I mean she's kind of taken aback by this kid because he's like asking her out or trying to just forcing his way into her life. Now, I get the impression that they live close to each other. They didn't really show that, but they're like from the same neighborhood. But yeah, she like eventually just kind of not won over exactly, but can't help but hang around him and do stuff with him. He's like an entrepreneur doing busy water beds, which I didn't realize water beds existed in the early 70s. I knew about them in the early to mid 80s. They were kind of a thing. They were maybe they had been around much earlier and just didn't hear about them. I don't know. Maybe the parts of the West Coast, they were out on the West Coast first. I don't know, but I was thrown off by that. It's like, why is it talking about water beds in the 70s? I didn't even realize. And then he tries to pursue a pinball thing when pinball became legal. It became illegal at one point. I don't know if parents in the 50s and 60s thought it was, detrimental to the kids, when then they legalized it. I didn't realize they had to legalize a video game or a pinball, a game of any kind. But, they kind of go throughout different parts of Hollywood, like Hollywood, and there's Bradley Cooper plays this guy named John Peters, who I guess is married to Barbara Streisand. I have to look that up, but Bradley Cooper pretty much plays an ass, but I mean, I guess you're a kid and you're a little intimidated. You're a little bit, I guess Cooper himself was intimidated a little bit just acting with him, which is weird. But that the scenes with him, that series of scenes, oh my God, that was bad. That must have taken some time to shoot, because she was, Alana was having to drive one of those big trucks, and I don't know, it was I don't say it was uncomfortable to watch, but at the end of the whole scenario, not to spoil it, Gary's character is like celebrating. I'm like, it's not what I would be doing. I would just be like saying a prayer, because there's a gas shortage and all this stuff, and he was basically an ass. It's like, don't ruin my house. They were late to like install the waterbed and all this stuff, and I don't think they really did. Don't ruin my house and all this stuff. But they have Sean Penn makes a cameo, which is pretty good. I mean, it was a little hard to follow some of the dialogue. It seemed like in all these different exchanges, at least toward the middle to the end of the movie, it's like the two of them, Alana and Gary, were supposed to be together, but they're not exactly accepting each other, but they're not accepting the other with someone else. So it's like a jealousy thing. It's kind of competition, one-upping thing. That's what I kind of got from each scene. Paul Thomas Anderson was trying to do with the characters, to say, you're spending time with someone else, but you really need to be with this person, etc. Alana's character ends up, helping a campaign from someone she knew before she met him, maybe a high school classmate or something. And of course, there's stuff about the candidate that she's campaigning for. I'm not going to spoil it, but it gets revealed toward the end. But yeah, I mean, I liked a lot of it. I liked almost more of what it was trying to do at points, but I just felt like, the realism wasn't quite there. It's almost like this was a sort of surreal, parallel universe, kind of dreamy, like a dream scenario of someone, or like in a parallel universe where the whole, like, Gary's character doesn't have a father that we ever meet. His mother is too busy with her business in Vegas, and she's more like an older sister in some ways. He's got a younger brother too, and he's like basically raising the older. The kids are kind of running the show. It's almost like Stranger Things. It's actually kind of in some ways it's like a Stranger Things perspective, in that it's nonchalant. The normal responsibilities and things you'd worry about of kids that age, in that environment, school, work, driving a car, he gets at one point he gets brought in by the police, and that is not explained really well at all. And, there's all this stuff that happens, but it's so nonchalant that it reminds me a lot of like Wes Anderson too, and PTA, and those two guys are not the same, but I can see that sort of being Paul Thomas Anderson's style. That's not the whole agenda, the whole direction of the way the characters are supposed to treat their situations. But it ends up sort of being difficult to sort of be won over by and care about them fully. Now, I'll say this, that both, Cooper Hoffman and Alana Haim were both very good, and so I can understand some of the award buzz and recognition for this movie. But it ultimately sort of ended up being sort of less flowing, sort of less. I mean, where are they headed exactly? We don't. I mean, yeah, the ending sort of does fit in a way, but it's like all that for just that. I mean, you don't want to like sort of have everything happen in 20 minutes, but at the same time, it was like a case of it went on longer than it needed to, but they didn't want to have it go on too long. And it's just kind of, I couldn't get fully won over by it. I liked moments. I liked the acting. I liked, Cooper Hoffman has a very likable presence, similar to his dad in a way, but also different to his dad. His character was very kind of happy in a lot of ways. He wasn't phased. It was hard to really... He's like this businessman who's 15. It's really hard to really believe it could happen, but in tropes, in some circles, you can sort of understand. I mean... I don't know. I don't know examples of where someone who was, that young, even if they was in their late teens, something like Ralph Macchio, who always looked so young, when he came up in Hollywood. Maybe that's part of it. So, but I give it a thumbs up in a sense. I'm not seeing a lot of movies, unfortunately, so I don't know where it would like rank if I did a movies of the year from 2021. It would be considered because it actually came out last year, but. I would imagine there are other movies I probably would put a little higher than it, but at the same time, it's one of those movies I'm happy I watched because it was kind of bugging me, all the talk about it. It's like, this is a movie I probably should see. It kind of had, the 70s element, I have a sort of a little bit of a romantic sort of, even though I didn't grow up in the 70s, I appreciate things like, Fast Times, I guess, was actually filmed then, but, Freaks and Geeks, but more so I'm Dazed and Confused I'm thinking of. It reminded me of, aesthetically, very much of Dazed and Confused, which that movie was set in 1976, so go figure. The clothing, some people said, well, the way they talk, the sort of, liberal use of profanities and that kind of stuff, and just sexual innuendos, just sexual, discussing certain sexual things in sort of without having any sort of concern about it is a little hard to believe, because I think even though things were starting to become more open, it was still conservative enough in terms of children's exposure. There's some movie that wasn't with, I don't know if it was Philip Seymour Hoffman, I'm thinking of Happiness. Yeah, it does have him. And that, maybe that was PTA too, I can't remember, because again, Philip Seymour Hoffman was in many of Paul Thomas Anderson's movies. That kind of had a similar deal where it's like, you're talking about things that typically aren't talked about so loosely with women and with children. And, while we're 30, 40 years later or whatever, and from then it was almost 40 plus years later, it's still kind of, that's it made me uncomfortable. I kind of had a little bit of a hard time sort of treating it seriously, and that's why I struggled with it. And that it's like, you're really going to be able to just loosely talk about that? This kid's 15, and the kids around him, I don't know, but maybe that's where we're headed. I guess in other cultures, stuff like that is not a big deal. We're too, stressed out and tight in our conservative, Anglo-Saxon family values in this country that we've been brought up to think that we can't talk about that stuff, but I don't know. I get it's a little bit like the TV series, the Winning Time series, in that a little bit of historical context is not really factored into the way it was shown. And maybe it wasn't supposed, that's not the intent, but it's hard not to forget about that while you're watching a period piece set in 1974 or whatever this is. So, the music is pretty good. There's a lot of things I liked about it. So, if you haven't seen Licorice Pizza, I'm glad I didn't spend a lot of money to see it, but if you haven't seen it, way worth seeing. Maybe you can catch it on your streaming networks at some point, the next 6 months to a year. Otherwise, maybe the DVD or Blu-ray will be out or something like that, or wait for it to come on other TV channels, or have a friend that has it or something. So, But yeah, so that's my take on Licorice Pizza. Again, if you haven't seen it, if you have seen, what's your take? If you haven't, what was your thoughts? I'd love to hear them. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.